Welcome to the Web API intro. The tools we're going to use are Chrome Postman to issue our requests and eXist-db as our API server backend. The reason why I have Command & Conquer Tiberium alliances up is because they use an HTTP API for their entire game. So let's get right into it. For the server side, we're going to use eXist. eXist-db is an XML platform that lets you build full-blown HTML applications and even host your own API. So for example, and this language is xQuery, which we don't have to get into, but in this example, first we have a function. We declare a function that returns a XML fragment, and the annotations that REST-XQ inside of eXist gives us is a way to mark up our function as an API function. So the first one is a get. We're going to be performing a get on the resource, and the path to the resource, and the type of serialization that this data is going to come across the wire. In this case, the path is /WAG v1 cars Honda. You'll notice that Honda is hard-coded in here. So if we wanted to support different car manufacturers, we would have to create hundreds of these functions hard-coded with Honda, Mazda, Chevy. Let's look at what this would look like on the client. So on the client, we have the base URI, which is this, and it's always going to be the same for our API. What's going to change is the path to the resource. If we send it, we see that we retrieve some JSON data, and the status is 200. So a status of 200 is okay. There's other statuses like 100 being a continue, which is also acceptable. And then the 400 to the 500 range usually means that the client performed an operation and provided either bad syntax or was not authorized. So it's usually the blame falls on the client side instead of the server side. If the status code is above 500, that means that something bad happened internally in our API server. So the way we would rewrite this to be more dynamic, if we move on to our version 2, we're going to use URL templating. So we're going to replace the Honda segment with a template, and this template, the $make, is an xQuery variable that's going to get injected into our function. So then inside of our function, if the make is Honda, then we're going to return a resource. Otherwise, we're going to return a null resource. So let's see what that looks like in our API client. We're going to make a call for Honda. We get Honda. If we make a call for Mazda, there's no documents in our database for Mazda, so we're going to return a null. Still status of 200. We can approach this differently too with query parameters. Query parameters are name value hashes added to the end of the URL. And in this case, we're defining, so we took out the Honda segment here. Now our path is just WAG v2 cars, but we're going to define two query parameters, one for make and one for the type of sort, either ascending or descending in alphabetical order. So you see these two variables. When they get expanded, they get injected into our function. And if we ask for Honda, we get a resource, otherwise it's null. Inside the function here, we're going to take a look at the sort variable. If it's descending, we're going to sort the cars in descending order. Otherwise, they're going to be sorted in ascending order. So let's see what that looks like. In our API client, we've defined two query parameters, make and sort. So if we ask for Honda, we're going to get Honda models in descending order. If we change this to ascending, we're going to get them in ascending order. And if we leave it out, we're also going to get them in ascending order because that's the default. So if we ask for Mazda here, we should get a null response. Still a 200 status. In API servers, if you request a resource that does not exist, you will most likely get a 404 error, not found, which makes sense. So here we've rewritten our URL template function. If we ask for Honda, we'll get a resource. Otherwise, we're going to get a status of 404. So let's see what that looks like. We ask for Honda, there's our resources. If we ask for Mazda, our status is 404 not found. And this makes a lot of sense. Sometimes other APIs approach it, they also return a message with a 404 response. So if we take a look at that in our version 4, if we ask for a resource that does not exist, we're going to get a 404 message, but we're also going to get a nice little message saying, maybe a little more detailed as to what happened. So let's see what happens here if we ask for Mazda or Asda. We still get a 404, but we also get a message. One thing with Unity's www class is that if the response is unsuccessful, meaning it's not 200 to 300, that this message does not come across the wire back to us. So in Unity, if we're using the www class, all we would get is the 404. We would not see this message. Other assets like UniWeb and Best HTTP, they also provide us with this data back. Another thing I wanted to show you in here is the 400. So a 400 is usually a status code when we issue a request and we've screwed up the syntax and it's totally the client's fault. So here we're going to check if our resource contains a period, then that's an invalid request. So you can type in anything with a period and we get a 400 bad request and the message is invalid request. Other API servers, what they do is if a resource is not found, they'll still return a 200 status code, but they will include a fault. So this is sometimes more useful, I think, than returning a 404, and I'll show you later why. But the way that this looks like, if we ask for Honda, we get Honda back. If we ask for something else, we get a 200 back, but our operation is faulted. So we're kind of taking the responsibility off of HTTP and its status codes and embedding that responsibility inside the response. All right, let's talk about content negotiation and representations. So far we've been retrieving JSON data back. That's a valid representation of our model's resource, but also the other valid representations could be XML, a flat file, or images. So the way that eXist handles it is it adds another annotation, REST produces, and saying that it's going to produce application JSON. So the response coming back is going to contain an HTTP header content type of application JSON. The way I can best show this to you, so here we have headers and we're going to issue the request for Honda models and we're only going to accept application JSON. There's our JSON. Now we've created another function that produces XML. So in this case we can ask for application XML and we get XML back. Now images is also a valid representation. So if we ask for image PNG, there's our image coming back from the server. So it's a nice way to, this content negotiation is a very nice way to support various formats of your resource. A lot of times if you're requesting let's say on Facebook, a person profile, well, sometimes you want the information about the person, but the image of the person is also valid. So that's with our produces. Let's talk about headers. So in this previous example, we've sent over a header of accept. Well, what if we also wanted our request to be authenticated by the server somehow? So we've included an XAuth, our own little header with a password that we want to send to the server. And we'll take a look at here. There's another REST annotation header parameter, and this auth variable is going to get injected into our function, and if it's empty or the auth is secret password, or if it's not empty or the auth equals secret password, does not equal secret password, then we're going to return a 401 status code, which is authorization was required, but it did not happen. So if we send this data over, we get the image back. However, if we send the wrong password, we get a 401 unauthorized. And if we leave it out, we're also going to get a 401 unauthorized. So I'm sorry, I kind of butchered that up, but if the auth variable is empty or it does not equal secret password, then we're not authorized to retrieve the resource. And the last example is posting data to the server. So here we have a function. Now the verb has changed to post. Before we were using get to retrieve resources, and in this case we're going to post data to the server. And an API, a post usually means creating a new resource, where a put means modifying an existing resource, and delete means removing an existing resource from the database. So in this case, WAC v1 cars is our path, and our posted payload here is going to get injected into our function, and we're just going to return a response of added whatever our payload was. So if we try this here, you'll notice that it's a post, and we're going to post a new make of Mazda, and Mazda was added.